It's pretty much the same basement you know and love from seasons 1 and 2, decorated for Christmas for reasons I don't know.
In July of 2016, Netflix transported us all to the small town of Hawkins, Indiana, where we went on to meet the lovable cast of Stranger Things. Little did we know that the show would go on to become the most popular series in streaming history and become a talking point amongst friends for years to come. But what would you see if you showed up on the set of the show and took a peek behind the curtain? Would you see a ginormous green screen or Hawkins itself? Well, make sure you stick around because we are going to take a deep dive into some behind-the-scenes secrets of Stranger Things. But first, a simple reminder on how to enter our brand new giveaway. We will be giving away either an iPhone X Max, the new iPad mini, or a MacBook Pro. It's all your choice. So be sure to leave a like, comment the keyword, subscribe, and turn on notifications to enter the giveaway. It's really that simple. First, the props don't just look old. Stranger Things is known for its ability to transport the viewer to a time when Guns N' Roses and Bon Jovi blared from the radios of classic American muscle cars, and nothing was cooler than slicking your hair back and donning some colorful clothes. Since playing on the nostalgia of 80s babies is such an important aspect of the show, a lot of effort is put into making the set look as 80s as possible. Dressing colorfully in old clothing and cutting one's hair in a variety of styles popularized during the time period is one thing, but having appliances, transportation, and other items found in and around an 80s household is an entirely different monster. In fact, fans were so perplexed by how 80s the show appeared that rumors began to spread about the show's props. Apparently, the props department had been asking the VFX department for some help, digitally touching props up to appear older than they actually were. I mean, this was surely the case, as no single person owns so much 80s apparel and antiques, right? Well, boys and girls, that rumor was actually put to bed by Linda Rice, the Hollywood prop master that works for the show. According to Linda, she spends hours on end scouring the internet and garage sales for props that will feel right at home on set. This way, the show saves money by not having to digitally touch up any props, and unbeknownst to the viewer, the show gives off an air of realism. Eggos, Dungeons & Dragons sets, VHS players, and handlebar bicycles, this show has them all. And believe it or not, they're absolutely real. And with production having spent a total of $220,000 so far on these props, I don't think there's any question as to how serious they are about keeping the 80s nostalgia on point. Now, those are some props I wouldn't mind taking home. What about those demo dogs? One of the most intriguing points of Stranger Things' universe portrayed to us so far was when we watched Dustin fall in love with Dart, his little demo dog friend. That, unbeknownst to him, actually came from the stomach of Will. Although gross, we watched in wonder as little Dart grew from a slug-like character to something you could actually play fetch with. Until finally the popular teenagers realized that Dart was, in fact, a growing demogorgon. Common knowledge tells us that these creatures are not real, right? So the question that remains is, what exactly were the cast interacting with when Dart and other demogorgons were on screen? Were they just looking into empty space most of the time? As it turns out, the production team wanted to make things as realistic as possible for the young actors and actresses, and thus made gelatin models of the demo dogs and demogorgons to act as placeholders in these scenes. This way, the cast was able to maintain eye contact with or carry the models when the scene asked for it. This was especially helpful where Finn's character Mike was asked to stare at Dart intently while having him rest on his hand. When the demogorgons were fully grown, however, the gelatin molds were found to be way too small. This meant that members of the production team had to take turns running around the set with a gelatin mold of a demogorgon's head stuck to a stick. Hey, at least they got a bit of a workout for the day. Let's talk about Eleven's nosebleeds. As someone whose nose bleeds on the regular, I never would have thought that the production team would have had a problem recreating the frustrating condition whenever Eleven used her powers in a scene. The more I think about it though, the more I understand exactly how difficult this must have been. I mean, surely they can't have a blood vial or contraption of sorts up Millie's nose to release the blood, right? That would be way too uncomfortable and might result in some child endangerment lawsuit. Or maybe it's completely CGI. Well, boys and girls, Millie has revealed that whenever the production team needed Eleven's nose to bleed during a scene, they would drip a precise amount of fake blood up her nose and have her act the entirety of the scene with her head tilted slightly back. That way, as soon as the need arose, Millie could whip her head forward and have the blood drip from her nose, giving a realistic depiction of an actual nosebleed. No wonder Millie gets paid the big bucks. It must, however, be said that sometimes this technique doesn't quite pan out how it's supposed to. Maybe the scene is too long, or maybe the blood doesn't exactly escape Millie's nose in the right way. Either way, there are times in which the VFX department is asked to add CGI blood to Millie during production. Now, if you're ever bored, you can always rewatch Stranger Things and try to figure out which nosebleeds are real and which are computer generated. We'd love to know in the comment section down below. Next, let's discuss the Demogorgon of Season 1. Stranger Things Season 1 introduced us to the Demogorgon, which, in simple terms, looked like something straight out of the nightmare realm. You'd be forgiven for thinking that this hellish creature was drawn up, designed in the virtual world, and then superimposed on the film through the use of visual effects, as was the case in the later seasons of the show. But did you know that the showrunners wanted to use as little computer manipulation as possible in the first season, leading them to actually casting a performer by the name of Mark Steger to play the role? Steger was made to wear a green skin suit underneath a rubberized Demogorgon costume, so that any parts of his body that stuck out of the rubber could be edited in post. The rubberized costume, although completely detailed and horrifying, was then manipulated with the use of virtual effects to give us the heart-stopping appearance of the antagonist that we have come to love. This means that every time Eleven was using her powers to force the Demogorgon against a wall, it was actually Mark who was being flung around, not some gelatin mold. Props to Mark Steger for giving such an incredible performance though. Without him, there's no doubt the Demogorgon would not have been as memorable as it was. Let's talk about the Void. The Void is something we fans still know very little about. It appears to be connected to the Upside Down because Eleven is able to communicate with those stuck on the other side through it, but at the same time, it shouldn't be confused for the Upside Down, as it looks entirely different, being a room of absolute nothingness with the inclusion of some water. In order to create this effect of relative darkness, the production team kitted out a hockey rink with pitch black curtains and filled it with just enough water to reflect in full whoever is standing on it. The only effect that was added in post was a color contrast, making Eleven and any other visitors appear to be a lot darker than they actually were. This way, it didn't look like Millie was just standing on a darkened stage, but rather was in an entirely different dimension. Talk about ingenuity. Next up is the Mind Flayer. Speaking as a prominent player of Dungeons & Dragons, there was nothing scarier than the Stranger Things adaptation of the Mind Flayer as a giant squid-like monster that could not only destroy physical barriers with ease, but control people through the use of its telepathic powers. In fact, I can guarantee you I wasn't the only one having nightmares about the Season 2 antagonist. That being said, did you know that behind the scenes, the terrifying Mind Flayer was nothing more than a man wearing a skin-tight red suit and giant metallic-looking helmet? Seriously, you need to look up the original footage before any virtual effects were added, as it's hilarious to see a man running around set in a leotard while props go flying in each and every direction. Not only is it amazing to see before and after shots, it really makes you appreciate the artistic vision of the showrunners and production team. It also makes sleeping a lot easier knowing that the Mind Flayer can't actually hurt you. Believe me, I know. Let's say goodbye to Joe. It's always nice to see our favorite cast members getting along with one another, and there's no greater example of this than the cast members of Stranger Things, who seem to have an incredibly close relationship with one another. There are many behind-the-scenes examples of this behavior, such as the sock puppet kiss between Joe Keery and Natalia Dyer, as well as the ketchup and mustard routine performed on set by Millie Bobby Brown and Sadie Sink. One thing you might not have known about the cast members is that the kids have a group chat on which they post jokes and juicy details about their personal lives. During the running of Season 1, the group chat included all of our favorite characters, but on hearing how much older Joe Keery was, he was promptly kicked out of the Cool Kids Club. To put this into context, Joe Keery portrays Steve the Hare Harrington in the Stranger Things universe, and Steve is about 18 or 19 years of age during the running of Season 3. Joe, on the other hand, is a whopping 28 years old. Unfortunately for Joe, the older cast members don't seem to have their own group chat, so he's had to go on feeling like the excluded one. Let's hope that with time he gets invited back though. Anyway, that wraps up the video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a thing or two. With Season 4 Stranger Things coming out soon, we are all excited to see what happens. See you in the next video.